The NWSL schedule is out. Actually, Herc, I don't know if you saw it. I first saw this on SportsCenter earlier today. How about that for a schedule drop? Regular season begins March 16th, one day after the Challenge Cup, which will be played between Gotham, your defending champions, and San Diego Wave, your Shield winners. Regular season comes to an end November 3rd, where 8 teams will qualify for the playoffs ahead of the NWSL Championship to be played November 23rd. Now, of course, we're very excited here at ESPN for our part of the schedule, which will kick off March 16th on ABC, nonetheless. Kansas City Current against Portland Thorns. Of course, Kansas City working on that beautiful brand new stadium. We'll have some playoff games on ABC as well. 2 quarterfinals, 1 semifinals. And we will have plenty of chances to see the defending champions, Gotham FC, on the ESPN family of networks 7 times in 2024. For more on the National Women's Soccer League, thrilled to welcome into the show our good friend and colleague, Jeff Kassouf. He's got some great work over at ESPN.com right now, including an article where he grades some of the big moves that we've seen around the NWSL over the last couple of weeks. We'll get to that in just a second here. But, Jeff, it's schedule release day. Your first thoughts on the schedule? I got to point out one thing. I love the fact that it's balanced. Now we can really put some weight on the Shield winners.
Oh, shots fired.
I love a balanced schedule. I love getting a schedule in January. That's a first. Look, I'm excited for that game in Kansas City to open that stadium, first stadium built for an NWSL team. 11 years ago, this league kicked off with a first game, same matchup, well, sort of the same matchup, Portland and Kansas City, a different iteration of Kansas City, and they played it on a high school football stadium. So 11 years later to be in a stadium purpose-built for that team on the riverfront. It's going to be an incredible scene, sold out, I'm sure. So I think that's an exciting one. You guys talked about Gotham pointing to that championship rematch on June 30th with the rain. And then, you know, I think obviously the end of the season, I'm disappointed no decision day, but, you know, I think we're going to have quite a finale again, because every single year this league delivers on the parity. We've got 8 playoff teams now, up from 6. So I think we're going to have another season that comes down to the wire, certainly for playoff spots, and I would guess the Shield again as well.
All right, let's talk about the Challenge Cup, Jeff. What's going on with the Challenge Cup today? Change in the tournament format, only 1 game. What's the future look like? There were a lot of complaints last year. I'm hoping this isn't a case where they treat it like the Open Cup. What's going on with the Challenge Cup?
Yeah, so Challenge Cup is now a one-off. I think the best comparison here is Community Shield in a U.S. version of it, which is the NWSL Shield winner, which is the regular season champion, versus the NWSL Championship winner. That's the format they've committed to going forward. Look, could that change in the future? I'm sure it could. I mean, clearly this is a tournament that's been tweaked a lot, right? It started out as a pandemic tournament to replace the regular season in 2020. It became a preseason tournament, then became this sort of stretched out FA Cup type of thing. And the problems with it really were it filled in on weekdays, and it congested the schedule in an unnecessary way. So those were really some of the complaints about it. And this really solves that. There are more to come in terms of friendlies and tournaments, I think. But, you know, in terms of the Challenge Cup itself, it makes it a one-off event. It's before the season, doesn't count toward the regular season. And it has some stakes to it, right? I mean, champions versus Shield winners. We always love to have the debate. You know, Seb was just talking about put some weight on the Shield. So now we get to open, presumably, each season now with last year's Shield winner versus the championship winner, and some stakes on the line.
Jeff, I mentioned your article over on the website, and I think the move that for me has maybe stood out the most over the offseason is Emily Fox going from the National Women's Soccer League to Arsenal. I wonder what you make of the move, both from Fox's perspective, right, what it means for her U.S. future, and then bigger picture, do you think it might be the first of many moves of U.S. players going over to Europe? Because after the last World Cup, that's something that we talked about quite a bit as something that U.S. players might need to do in an effort to keep up.
Yeah, I actually just spoke with Emily Fox for an article that we'll have on ESPN.com soon, and she spoke about this, and this was a dream of hers, the European dream of sorts before the World Cup. And I did ask her, you know, did the World Cup sort of push you along in any way? And she didn't feel that it did. I mean, she felt like, she said flat out she would have made this decision World Cup year or not. And it was something that she thought about. Actually, she thought about going to Europe when she was drafted #1 overall a few years ago, decided the NWSL was right at that time, get her feet under her as a pro, and now's the right time for her. So it's a big move for her. I think she's already at 25 among the best fullbacks in the world. This is a move she views as a way to refine her game and really firmly make her the best fullback in the world and round out her game in a way that maybe the NWSL didn't quite offer, a different look, so to speak, which to your point, Seb, is a topic that we've been talking about, right? As Emma Hayes comes in, as the U.S. tries to get back on that podium going forward. So I don't know if this will be a trend. I think there was that thought, right? And the winter transfer window comes and goes. You know, Gotham gobbles up half the U.S. women's national team, it feels like. Most of the U.S. players stayed in the NWSL, even when they had the free agency at their will. So, you know, I think it's a case by case, which is effectively what Emily Fox told me. And I don't think she'll be the last player by any means, but I don't know that we'll get that mass wave. I think it'll be really interesting to see if that actually plays out, because the NWSL has, you know, its pros and cons. So does Europe. I mean, I think that you can't really paint either as a monolith, right? So it's really a case by case. What's the club you're getting into? What's the player we're talking about? Who's the player, and what are the needs for that player to develop?
All right, Seb's talking about players leaving to Europe. What about players from Europe coming to the league here domestically, NWSL? I remember last time you were here, you said that there may be a perception and a bad perception of the level of play for the NWSL abroad in Europe. So what is a signing like Jessie Fleming, a record signing by the Portland Timbers from Chelsea, what significance, will that hold within the league or here for fans?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Portland, it's a big deal, right? I mean, they lose Crystal Dunn in free agency. That's a big loss in midfield. You know, I think Jessie Fleming is an immediate answer to that, along with you're developing Olivia Moultrie. You've got Hina Sugita, you've got Sam Coffey in the number 6. So I think it shores up some questions, some immediate questions that Portland had in a very positive way. And then at the league level, look, I mean, it's been quite a transfer window of sort of one-upmanship on what's the biggest salary. I mean, a few weeks ago, we we're talking to Maria Sanchez about the biggest deal in history. A couple weeks later, it's Mallory Swanson. It's the same thing happening right now in this transfer market with what are the biggest fees going on, both globally and in and out of the NWSL. And those answers, those records are changing on a near daily basis. So, you know, I think that's a positive sign for the global market. I think it's a positive sign that the NWSL is in that conversation and has incoming players in it. And, you know, I think that there are, as much as there are concerns, I think there are some perception issues. You know, the case by case remains, but there were some wins for the NWSL in this transfer window. Fleming coming in being one of them, keeping some of those U.S. players, many of whom went to Gotham in the NWSL, was a big win. And then honestly, I mean, I wrote about this as well. The coaching changes or ability to retain. You look at Casey Stoney being brought up as a Chelsea possible replacement at Chelsea for Emma Hayes. San Diego Wave go out and make sure that won't happen. They give her a long-term extension. Jonah Herculez coming in for the Spirit. I think there were a lot of positive coaching moves and the type of coaches that will attract some really top players as well. So I think it was a really positive transfer window for the NWSL in a lot of ways.
Jeff, before we let you go, I want to ask about trades, because it's something that's very common in American professional sport. But when we compare American soccer to global soccer, it's something that doesn't really exist in global soccer. And those are the players that the NWSL is, in theory, competing for and will continue to compete for. Over the last few weeks, we've seen really almost desperate reaction from players disappointed in finding out that they're being traded, that they don't really control their own destiny. For me here in Washington, the best example is Ashley Sanchez, right? Says she was shocked and disappointed to find out that she was getting traded to North Carolina Courage. How big an issue is this for the NWSL as they look to compete on a global stage? And is it something that the league might have to, I don't know if you can ever get rid of trades, but seriously limit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know if you can, certainly in the system that exists right now, right? So I think it's twofold, right? It is an issue for international players who don't understand it and the uncertainty that exists. And it's prevented signings flat out in the past. Now, some of the perception is shifting. I think some of the approach is shifting from some teams, right? We saw this around the expansion draft. There are teams that have said very explicitly, very publicly, you know, it's not that we won't ever make a trade, but we will work with a player if they want to go somewhere, if they feel they need to be somewhere else, and have some empathy in that. I mean, that's a key part of it. At the end of the day, it is still a mechanism that exists in a world that is a business and for teams that are competing against each other and trying to be better, right? And we heard those sentiments pretty flatly out of Kansas City this week, and a little bit to an extent also out of Washington, that this is a mechanism that exists. We took advantage of it. We did the best we could by people in their opinions anyway. But it exists. So, I don't know how you get rid of it flat out. I mean, free agency, all of these things relate back to free agency, right? And the fact that it finally exists in the NWSL is a positive. It still has its limits, certain level of terms before you can reach free agency, all these things. Getting rid of a draft, well, you need full free agency. Getting rid of trades, certainly you need full free agency. I think most teams and owners will probably, I don't know if we'll ever see that day, quite frankly, but I think it's something that is a concern, will always be a concern for the NWSL in terms of how it's viewed externally. And it's a continuation. I mean, I find this interesting in that women's soccer, the NWSL came from this organic place, right? And now it's shifting into this bigger business model. And this is sort of, in American sports, this is part of the business. And it's maybe not something that necessarily players want to have replicated, but it's something that's part of that big business that the NWSL strives for. So it's one of those tension points as this league grows.